Texas, the second largest state in the United States, made up of 267,338 square miles of land. Texas is bordered by the Red River in the northeast, by the Gulf of Mexico in the south, by the Rio Grande in the west, and by the Sabine River in the east. Each part of the state is vastly different from the next. Each has its own terrain, its own heritage, and East Texas is certainly no exception. The Caddo Indians were the first people to live in East Texas. They lived among the towering forest for 10,000 years before the first Europeans ever set foot on Texas shores. The Spanish were the first to send explorers to the region almost 500 years ago. Then the French claimed the territories, the Spanish reclaimed possession, and finally the Mexican government took charge in 1821 when they gained their independence from Spain. The city of Huntsville was founded in 1835, just a year before Sam Houston led some 2,000 troops to win the battles that won the Texas Revolution against Mexico. Huntsville came to be known as the Crossroads of Texas after the stage routes were established. In 1848, Sam Houston made his home in Huntsville. In 1863, he died and was buried here. Huntsville is located deep in southeast Texas, 70 miles north of Houston on Interstate 45. You can relive the life and times of one of the most colorful of the Texas heroes by visiting the Sam Houston Memorial Museum and Park Complex. The museum houses artifacts of Houston's life, and the 15-acre park contains 2 of Houston's homes and several nature trails. In 1988, the park and museum were threatened by budget cuts, and it seemed they would soon be forced to close to the public. So a group of local citizens banded together to create a folk festival to help save the museum. It's held every April, and it turned out to be one of the largest annual events in East Texas, a celebration of East Texas life skills and traditions. The General Sam Houston Folk Festival. The park, museum, and festival grounds are located just a few blocks south of the Old Town Square, on the land where Sam Houston lived. And it takes just a few days and a lot of hard work to make the transformation.
We have this park here, and all of this area, it's already set up. A beautiful place to have a festival.
Low bar, that'll up a quarter, that's it right there. Have some singing and dancing and instrumental groups. We're going to have old-time fiddling and guitar playing. We're going to have ethnic dances from all over the world. We'll have Mexican dances, Mexican music, Chilean, Philippine, Japanese, African, Chinese, Bavarian, have some Indian dances. We just have something for everybody.
The festival also offers a wide variety of ethnic foods and numerous demonstrations of East Texas life skills and traditions. When people first began to settle East Texas, they came by horse and mule, in covered wagons, and many just walked. Just like the Native Americans before them, they carried with them everything they needed to survive.
What we have set up is what's called a keep. And the keep was adapted from the Indians. The Indians used the keep originally to hang jerked meats from and dry meats. And basically then the white man took up on the idea and made it a place to store all his cook and grub goods. The water keg helps hold down the keep, keeps it solid for high winds. This is all portable. Everything tears down, rolls up, so you can transport everything real light. Heron wing feathers for fanning up your fires. Got to have some bells, make good magic, have better fires that way, you know. Got a little brush for scrubbing out your pots. Gourds for carrying water, drinking. We use gourds for storing dry goods. Usually the lightweight tinware was what they liked most because it didn't weigh as much, it was durable, you couldn't really break it. Ceramic and pottery was more Indian style. They used, if they had anything, they had earth-fired pottery. Most Indians didn't use dishes at all. They'd cook in the ground in the internal organs, the stomachs and other internal parts of the animals themselves. They could boil, and you could hang a stomach pouch from that tripod on the fire, heat up some rocks, and you could drop hot rocks in that what they called a paunch. And the Indians cooked in the pot, and then when they were finished, they even ate the pot.
Fire has always been a source of comfort, safety, security, things of this nature for man. All the sleeping gear that they had was their blanket that they carried with them, and the colder the night, the closer they slept to the fire. The way they built their fire was with flint and steel. When it got time for them to build a fire, they would gather all the materials that they needed to build their fire. First, they would need some tinder. This could be either dried grass, leaves, or in the case of what we have here, cedar bark. The first thing that you would do would be to form your tinder by crumbling it up, getting it to a powdery consistency, and you do this in the form of what is called a bird's nest. I have a flint, my steel, and in this little container I have some charred cloth. Charred cloth was one of the more important parts of building fire. That's why they carried it in a little watertight container. You place the charred cloth on the edge of the flint, and you come down and strike the edge of the flint with your striker. To catch a spark on the charred cloth is your main objective. Okay, I have a couple of them now. So I'll place this in my tinder and blow. Okay, once you get your fire going, you will begin to place your twigs and your shavings and build your fire using the larger materials as you go.
These are a couple old weapons of the period. What probably the trade gun was developed for trade primarily with the Indians. They could, the old traders could manufacture and get one of these for about $1.25. And then they'd trade them to the Indians. They were smoothbore, they weren't real accurate. They kept the rifled weapons primarily for themselves, so they always had a little advantage over the Indians. They were pretty clever.
We always hear about those terrible battles and how we shot it out with everybody in the world, but very few of those actually took place. The rifle itself was a tool for survival, and its main purpose was to gain food for people to make a living on the frontier.
Got a powder measure. Build the powder measure out of the horn. Dump it down the barrel.
First step's just dump it right down the barrel of the rifle. All right, at this point we've got the powder in the barrel. We want to make sure that we get it to the bottom, so you tap it on the side. You don't want to leave that powder up and down the barrel, because if you do, you may get a fire here, another one here, or possibly one up here. You might not get enough velocity to throw that rifle ball out of the end of the barrel, and it would jam, or else it might actually come out the side. You wouldn't want to do that, you'd become injured. Remember, these things are a little bit dangerous, so you have to kind of be careful with what you're doing. Once you get the powder in, the next thing you do is reach into the possible bag and you find a patch.
These are smooth bores. Use a wad on top of that powder, where if we were loading live rounds, we'd use a lead ball.
that makes this rifle fire is this little blasting cap. There are two types of firing mechanisms. This one is cap and ball using a percussion cap. Another type is a flintlock.
This is a flintlock. It's got a little depression in there. It's called a pan. Got a little priming harm, a little fine grained powder in it.
The cap slips right onto the nipple, and now the rifle is ready to fire. If I were to fire this rifle, I would pull the trigger, the hammer would fall, hit the blasting cap, it would pop kind of like your child's cap pistol. Pop! A spark would go down the nipple, ignite that powder that we poured in, it would catch fire and explode. At that point, a great force would be created and throw the rifle ball out of the end of the barrel.
Close this piece, which is called the frizzen. Close it, and it's ready to fire.
All right, Joseph, we're going to shoot this rifle. Now, if it doesn't shoot, we'll do it again. Because remember now, this is black powder and it's cap and ball. They don't always work. If your ears are a little sensitive, now's when you put the fingers in the ears. All right, Joseph, let's look for a horse. Nobody's riding a horse. Okay, here we go. Fire in the hole! All right, Joseph.
Ready? Fire!
All right, it went off. We got that turkey. Thank you, Joseph. You're a good general. Okay, if you're interested...
When we dedicated, we had two men from Walker County that still have descendants all over the county, Hezekiah Ferris and George Lamb. George Lamb, L-A-M-B, Lamb, was killed at the Battle of San Jacinto. He was the only Walker Countian that we lost in the Battle of San Jacinto. But when we dedicated a historical marker at the grave of Hezekiah Ferris, I stood at the old fellow's grave and played this very flute and played this song, and it was a very sentimental time.
In East Texas, there was plenty of forest to build their homes from. They cut the logs to length, then they would notch the ends and fit the pieces together. A frame for the roof was built and covered with handmade shingles.
They would place the blade of the froe about a half-inch back from the edge of the block of wood, drive it down into the block with their big mallet, and then they would pull on the handle, and they call this breaking it over. They would break it over, and 2 or 3 times, and the shingle or shake would pop right off. He would place the piece in the jaws here, clamp down on it with his foot, then using his draw knife or draw shave, he would work to straighten up and to dress up the shingle or shake. The harder you mash down with your foot, the tighter it would hold. With just a little bit of effort, you would have you a shingle that would be usable. Now, a good man using a froe and a mallet with good materials could make as many as 1,000 shingles in a day. I don't know how many it would take for the average early Texas pioneer log cabin, but I think that probably within 2 days he could have all the shingles that he needed to put the roof on his house.
Run around the barrel and bend the line. Get around enough to turn them on around. Took her to Q.
When enough people had settled an area, they found they could sell or trade services for the things they needed. A woman might make rugs or spin yarn to sell to a weaver. A man might be a blacksmith, or he might make furniture. And some people were potters.
In the 1800s, the potters in Texas used a kick wheel like this, and the kids could make clay balls and hand them to them, and they could throw them all day. So some people turned out hundreds of pieces, and they needed that volume because that's what they had for containers, storage containers, things to eat out of and so forth. Potters who came to Texas sought out a clay deposit. That's where they settled. That's why they settled where they did. That was the case with the Myers family. They came over and finally got things together and started and had a few generations who carried on the tradition. And the clay deposit ran out and they quit. They didn't have the money to move. They just quit making pots. I'm throwing off the hump, and for small pieces, that's what they did. Instead of putting a little piece, a little piece, a little piece, they'd get one big piece and just throw off of it and throw off of it and throw off of it until it was all used up. This fleece is right straight off of the sheep, and it has all of the grass and straw and knots and everything in it that had right on there, since sheep are never groomed. But it takes it from a tangled up, pretty tightly knotted mess to a light, fluffy thing called a rolag. Most of it comes out fairly quickly after the first few pulls, almost all of them. What's left is so small that I can just pull it out as the yarn goes in. So from that mess, you get something that's fairly lightweight and airy. It's much easier to handle that way. I just laid the loose fibers against the yarn and allowed it to twist, and it just started all again and grabbed the old end of it. Sheep's fleece has a lot of natural oil in it called lanolin, and that helps it hold together. And then since the fibers have been laid fairly parallel, I can pull them out and stretch it, and that's the fewer I leave in there in this V between my hands, the thinner the yarn is. After I have filled up a couple of these spindles, all this cord does really is just transfer the spin from the big wheel to the small wheel. Then the yarn comes through this pipe onto the spindle. When this is filled up and 2 or 3 more like it, I take them off of the wheel, put an empty spindle on the wheel, and then ply them all together. And once that's done, that's ready to use in any way you want, either weaving or knitting or crocheting, any way that you'd use a yarn.
Most people had to supply themselves with entertainment. They might carve wood.
And the knives have various shapes to give you the kind of shape you want.
Or make lace. Some even made and played their own musical instruments. The tradition and techniques were passed from generation to generation, and their products often became a source for additional income, or sometimes as their main trade.
Tatting is a lost art. You don't hardly ever see it. But I've been making tatting 79 years. I was 10 years old when I started making tatting. And I crochet and embroider and knit. Oh, I do most anything with my fingers.
All right, this instrument operates on the same basis of a bagpipe, where you have the drone reeds on a bagpipe giving you the drone sound. This has 2 strings that constantly give you a drone. But anyway, you play it by depressing the melody strings with your finger or with a noter like this. And as you depress it behind the fret, you change the pitch of the string. And that's the way you get a melody on it. It's very simple, just like playing a melody on a piano with one finger.
Also passed down through generations were the remedies of folk medicine.
We have 2 plants here which are folk medicine plants outstanding. This is lechuguilla. It is an agave in the same family with the century plant. But it is a singular plant. In the base of this plant is where we got the primary source of cortisone. Before we made it synthetically, I understand this was about the only source.
A large portion of these remedies still work to this very day. Though some had their roots in superstition, most were developed over a long period of time by trial and error, and they became the basis for many of the cures still used in modern medicine.
Now, if you're caught off in a camping trip and you get yourself cut and you want to sterilize the place and give a healing too, you couldn't very well do better than to just break open an onion. This is highly sterile, and it has the curative powers of the onion. Just strap this over the wound like this, and you could probably not do any better if you got to the drugstore. Now, this has the curative powers of iodine. You'd insert this in a bullet wound and it heals from inside, cutting out chances of gangrene, blood clot. And you just trim it off with Pancho Villa. This was his favorite.
People from all over come to Huntsville every April to enjoy the heritage, life skills, and traditions of the General Sam Houston Folk Festival. If you would like more information, you can call toll-free. It's great fun for the whole family.